Hello, all you wickedly wonderful witches out there. Welcome to Wyrd Witchcraft, where we talk about witches, witchcraft, the unseen, and everything in between. I'm your host, Lynn Stevens, and figured today would be a good day to do cards and crafting. You know, let's call this episode Cards and Crafting. So I've got a paper, some watercolors, and some stuff that I'm working on. But the reason why I'm working on this is because I really wanted to talk about divination systems and creating your own. So you may or may not be aware that I am somebody that has spent years creating my own decks and using them in card readings, right? So here's just a couple of the cards that I use frequently. There's 5 different decks in here, and I really like being able to make my own because it gets in touch with my own creative side. And as I create the cards, I can connect with them on a much deeper level than I could with cards that were created by someone else. Now, that's not saying that cards that are created by someone else aren't valid and have a place. I've certainly still used some that I've never made myself, but for the most part I find that I get a more accurate read or just a more enjoyable divination session when I use my own cards. So I have kind of been an advocate the last few years of really being like, hey, you know, if you're struggling with getting tarot to work for you properly, or if you struggle with learning how to work with a certain type of divination system, maybe make your own cards, or make, you know, one of the things that's really popular right now is junk oracles, where they take pieces of things that mean something to you. So for me, like my brand new sweater I just finished making, well, it's not 100% done, I still need to do the buttons, but maybe for me I would use a stitch marker in my junk oracle, and the stitch marker could indicate that this is a time to get into something creative and recharge my battery, if you will, because it's something that I really enjoy doing. So if this is something that is a part of my junk oracle, then depending on where this falls in the wheel, say it falls in the mental category, you're like, hey, you know, maybe you're feeling a little blocked lately because you haven't given yourself enough time to think about something in a creative way, right? So that could be a way to create an oracle for yourself. You know, I've got Lemurian crystal. Now, granted, I probably wouldn't put this in the junk oracle, but like, say you have a favorite little crystal, you could put a crystal or two in your junk oracle. You know, buttons or pins or charms, whatever. Little rocks that have significance. Wow, that was really hard to say. Significance to you. You know, it doesn't have to make any sense to anybody else. It just has to make sense to you. And even if you're going to be reading for other people, the symbols are very personal to you and what you have experienced in this life. So you can still read for others based on the experiences that you've had. So making cards, making oracles, making divination systems for yourself can also impact doing readings for others. So, I mean, I do use these in a professional wow, words really are hard today. In a professional capacity. So I use these in readings for people that they pay for, right? So it doesn't have to be just for your own use. It can be something that you use in your everyday stuff, right? So how do these people that create cards in the first place come up with their ideas? Well, they dive in and they go for it. I'm pretty sure there are many things that I've seen in the divination realm or spectrum that it's like, hey, that's a neat idea, but it would be nice if X was around or Y was around. And if you feel that way, you don't have to have like the greatest artistic talent in the world. Look at my coffee has cream today. Can you imagine that? You don't have to have like the most artistic flair for anything. You can write words. Now, I don't have any with me, but I've done several decks where it's just written words, or it's images that just kind of came out of nowhere, and they don't actually have a specific point of reference, but when I was doing them, it was the feeling I got from them. Especially, let's see, which deck is it? These guys here. You know, this is a deck that has certain imagery in it. It's not a picture of anything that you would be able to really say, ah, that's a picture of this, right? So the images on your pictures or the images on your cards don't have to be like, this is a pair of lips for me anyway. It could be a leaf to somebody else, but they don't have to be something that is readily recognizable. They can be whatever you want them to be. And when you have this creation, this space where these are the things that I want to do with this, this is the direction I want to take this, you have the freedom to be able to do that. And when you connect with the cards or the junk oracle or the whatever runes or whatever you're planning on making, you know, when you connect with it, it gives them a deeper meaning for you. Again, it doesn't have to mean anything to anyone else if you're making them for yourself. I mean, if you're making them to sell them en masse, well then yeah, you might have to put in a little bit of extra effort in, you know, writing down what the cards actually mean, but that doesn't mean you have to use prerequisites for things, right? It means that, hey, you know, when I look at this card, when I study that and look at it, it reminds me of a bromeliad, which is a type of plant. So for me, it talks about established growth, things that are already set in motion that are going to be able to be helpful in the future. It's something that is going to bring new life into a situation, right? So it's like, it kind of, to me, that's what it represents, but to somebody else it could be feathers, it could be leaves, it could be anything really. Or you can go somewhere where, like, this is definitely one of those symbols that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Butterfly, right? So you can add stuff that has significant meaning to you in your oracles or in your decks. You can go off of other systems. Like, I do have cards that are part of a Lenormand deck, right? So I've created the symbols and the images that I wanted, but they're still the images that you would find in a traditional Lenormand deck. So they're already pre-established symbols. I just went with the designs and images that I wanted for my own personal deck. In fact, I have two of them. This is another this is another one of a Lenormand deck that has completely different, where's that one? Completely different look to it and a completely different feel. So that's the same card in two different decks. So you can create decks that already exist in your own image or in your own style, or you can go with something that has never been done before. Here's something, I don't know what that means. You know, okay, what's this one? I don't know. What does it mean when I look at it? What do I see? I'm like, okay, when I look at this card, I see two people talking, and it almost looks like they're, in concert with each other, like they're talking about something that is secretive or that they don't want other people to know about. It's a whispered, shared thought, right? So when that comes up in a reading, it could mean that there's somebody wanting to share a secret with you, or it could mean somebody's talking behind your back, depending on how it feels when you pull that card, right? It doesn't have to have a set meaning. Its vibration can include a bunch of different things. Like, what was I feeling when I created that card? I don't know. It's not really anything that is something that I feel when I create it. It's, how does it make me feel when it comes up in a reading for someone, or when it comes up in a reading for me? So this one could be, scattering seeds, being able to share ideas or share thoughts. It could also mean, hey, maybe you're spending too much of your energy on outside things, or too much of it on other people, right? You want to go out from under the desk? Okay, puppy wanted out. Right? So I think people get caught up in, this has to mean this, or that has to mean that. And when I create this, it means this, and it can't mean anything else. So I think sometimes we get caught up in trying too hard to fit things into categories that maybe they don't need to fit into. When I made these cards, I didn't know the direction that we're going to go in. I didn't know how they were going to turn out. And they have a very interesting feel, very cosmic feel to me, otherworldly, light language, alien activation kind of stuff. So when I get that energy from someone where it's like, hey, they might actually be open to this, this is the deck that I go for. If the energy that's coming off of them is like, oh, I don't know, I'm just kind of here and I'm not sure what to expect, usually I'll start with the Lenormand deck, because it is an established system. But the thing is like, even with an established system, so like the moon talks about intuition, it talks about compassion, it talks about hidden, unseen things, but it can also talk about cyclical patterns. The fullness of the moon could be that there is something ripe and ready to blossom, like now is the time, now is the place. It could mean nighttime, something hidden in the dark. When we get stuck on this card has to mean this, I think that's why people get so wrapped up in trying to understand or trying to memorize what everything is. It's like, the book is great because sometimes you just like, I don't know, especially if you're reading for yourself. Sometimes you have an idea about something, and then you look at a book or you consult someone else and they're like, oh, this is what I see. And so you might have a biased perspective and be like, oh, okay, I never looked at it that way. Or you look back at the book and you're like, oh, I had a really negative view of the way these cards were going. And looking at the way that they're explained in the book says to me that I was being a little negative and that the cards actually don't reflect that at all, right? So there's that aspect of it as well. So, why do I think it's important to create your own oracle? I've already mentioned that, yeah, you connect with it. You can kind of have a better appreciation for the symbols on the cards and all that as well. But I also think that it has something a little bit to do with taking the time to get in touch with your own intuition and establish a language, right? A lot of times we get intuitive hits about stuff and we're like, I don't know what that means. Well, when you create your own intentional oracle, intentional deck, whatever, you are creating a language that your intuition and you can use to better understand each other. Your higher self, or whatever it is you want to call it, can then better use the language that you have created together to give you a clearer image, a clearer picture of the way things are going, or the trends or trajectories, or just give you a little bit more insight into how are we checking in today? What's going on? What's the energy like? You know, if you have where you write down, okay, what's the energy like today? And you sit there and you're like, okay, well, I feel this way. Well, I feel that way. But is that my feeling or is that something else? Okay, nothing wrong with that. But if you're like, I feel like I need a little bit of clarity. Okay, so I said, how's the energy sitting today? I'm just going to check in. And then all of a sudden, I throw an oracle, or I throw a junk oracle, and I get my stitch marker. So for me, that tells me, hey, maybe you should spend a little bit of time with yourself in some kind of creative endeavor, whether that's writing something down for 5 minutes, picking out a new crochet pattern, or, you know, doing a couple rows on an old pattern, or it might not even be crochet. It could be like, hey, you know, you have that creative thing that you're doing, maybe spend a few minutes working on that. Something that's going to fill you up, right? It doesn't have to be for anybody else but for you. So this stitch marker for me in a junk oracle would be like something for me and no one else, right? And I feel like when we are able to connect a little bit better with our higher selves, connect a little bit better with our intuition, we gain more clarity. You know, a lot of people, when they come and get a reading from me, they talk about how they just want a little bit more clarity, or they're just confused about something, or they're not sure about which way they should go. Well, it's all well and good that they come to me and we can pull that out and perhaps get a few answers for them. But I'm not going to ever tell you anything you don't already know yourself. And yes, it can be hard to hear that for yourself, to know that you already have the answer. But when you have something like a junk oracle or a deck of cards or something that you have invested your time and energy into, you can use that because you've used your own intuition, you've used your own energy to create that symbiotic relationship. So now you're like, I'm a little confused about this situation. So you pull out your deck of cards that you just finished making and you throw a couple cards and then you sit with it and you're like, oh, well, when I made that card, this is how I feel or felt. But now it kind of feels a little bit like this. And so if that feels true to you, that's the answer. And you didn't go to anybody else for it. The cards didn't tell you that. You already created these. This is already a symbol that is in place. What happened was you threw the card down and you're like, oh, well, this makes me feel this way. And so what happens is the thoughts and feelings that you've had are things that were in your head. The card gave you clarity, but it didn't tell you anything you didn't already know, right? Same as when you get a reading. They're not going to tell you anything you didn't already know. And in fact, a lot of times when you go to a clairvoyant or whatever, and they're pulling all this information, and they're speaking it out loud, you're like, how did you know that? Well, the reason why we know it is because you already knew it. We're just pulling it out. But if you're quiet enough and you listen to yourself enough, you can pull out that information for yourself without having to go to somebody else to do it. So you reclaim your own power. You reclaim your own ability to do these things. And I'm not saying that it's not okay to go and actually spend time and money and whatever on somebody else that can help you, because sometimes you can't gain your own clarity. There's just too much stuff going on. And you're like, I need somebody else to help me with this because I can't get still or quiet enough for me to come up with this realization on my own, let's say. And so yes, of course, you want to get perspective from someone else. But know that it's coming from you all along, regardless of if you go to another person. They're taking the information that is coming from you and telling you what it's saying. Okay? Like, I really, really want to make that clear. Because a lot of people, I think, go do readings and they want somebody to tell them what to do, or they want somebody else to say this is what needs to be done, when in reality that other person is saying that, but it was you that had that information all the time. I feel like I'm flogging a dead horse now, so I'm gonna wrap it up today by saying that I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have ideas for thoughts and feelings about things, feel free to comment, feel free to mention them. And as I move forward, I honestly think that I'm just gonna say whatever's on my mind and hopefully you're along for the ride. Anyway, if you would like to be on Wyrd Witchcraft, you can always send me a private message and we can talk about it. I hope you guys have a really, really great day and do something good for yourself today. Whether that's spend 5 minutes doing something creative, or make yourself another cup of coffee or your favorite beverage, or whatever it is, listen to your favorite song. And I will see you next time. Bye.